Hey everyone, it's Ivan, kitbadger.com, out here to tell you about the 3-day Modern Warrior Conference. I had the good fortune earlier in 2023 heading back east in Pennsylvania for the Modern Warrior Conference. So broad strokes, kind of what is it? Well, it's a 3-day conference centered around being a modern warrior. So largely different hard skills to include a bunch of intangibles like mindset and some different kind of professional development talks, things along those lines with respect to being a modern warrior. Having those skills for, as Tom Kier says, violence with a capital V, and being able to defend yourself as well as family, friends, things along those lines. And so a number of different blocks of instruction, and with that, 4 main instructors kind of putting the whole thing on. You have Tom Kier, as well as Harley Elmore, Master Chim, and Bill Rapier of Amtech Shooting. And the overlap with all of those, even though they absolutely all bring something unique from their own experiences or career paths, things like that, but kind of where everything overlaps, think Venn diagram, is SIOC Collie. So maybe you've heard of Collie and you're like, oh yeah, like stick fighting from over there. Kind of, but no. So SIOC with respect to Collie is like very narrow in that, yes, it's martial art, but all the emphasis is on martial. Like there's not a lot of art for the sake of art. Everything is, like really refined and tested out. Again, like violence, most of which having to do with blades and stuff like that. And so all those different instructors, like that's largely where the overlap is. And it was pretty awesome. And since I got there early, I actually had the opportunity to go kind of test out some of the stuff that they were gonna do. A little bit of time on the range, get in to work through, pretty cool target they had set up. And when you have a rad vehicle, why not mess around and play with said rad vehicle? That thing was so cool. Things kind of kicked off with essentially introductions, housekeeping. Hey, this is overarching view of what's going to be happening. And then from there, ended up going straight into the first block of instruction, which was with Tom Kier, and it was basically defense against blades. Like, to include when you do not yourself have a blade, how to come out, hopefully on the winning side of that engagement, which, albeit is incredibly difficult, but it is possible. And so started going through that. It was largely set up with a progression of techniques where it would initially be demonstrated, explained, and then people would have chances to kind of rep it out. And just kind of stair-stepping, working on all of these different progressions of the total sum of skills needed for this block of instruction. And then something kind of fun at the end was you basically, with your partner, start working pummeling, and then on the signal, produce a tool, some weapon, whether it's blade, pistol, something like that. And it was an exercise more in, can you do multiple things at once? So you're engaged with someone, and now you need to produce a tool from concealment, which, like if you've never done it before, like there is absolutely a learning curve, but the ability to get the tool out greatly increases your survival of a bad situation. After that wound down, it's time to break for dinner, and something that was really nice is pretty much all the lunches and dinners were catered. So you're there on site, and it creates a cool opportunity to break bread with good people. Most of the people were actually staying on site too, and so the opportunity to actually share a meal with people that you don't know, but chances are you have a lot in common with, both ended up at the same course, a lot of overlap there, and met some really great people out there. And after that evening, kind of wound down dinner, it's time for a fireside chat. And every year there's basically a theme with respect to the Modern Warrior Conference. This year happened to be professionalism. And so all 4 instructors kind of, a little round robin, and just kind of fleshed out the idea and concept of professionalism and what it means to actually live and walk that path.
Goes into an alpha brainwave pattern at certain times. Like it becomes meditative.
Yep. I
But
get it
like-
when I'm running,
Yep.
in between sets of lifting.
Yes.
Like, I've written so much curriculum in between sets.
That's
I hop
right.
off
Yep.
the pull-up bar and I'm just like,
Yep.
yeah.
Yep. And that's
That next morning, day 2, started out there on the range with live fire. So Bill Rapier, FAMTAC shooting, kind of going over a lot of information, stair-stepping on up. Initially starting with circle of awareness and getting into stance and grip. Kind of the culmination of that block before everyone kind of broke up into some different groups was retention shooting. So the ability to, with one-handed draw stroke, because your other one's probably busy if you're that close to someone, being able to get that pistol out and break effective shots largely down into the pelvic girdle and getting people to rep through that. After that, everyone kind of started breaking into some different groups and getting to go work on some other kind of drills basically. So a couple of Bill's AIs, assistant instructors, were helping run some different ranges. One of the ranges basically worked through drawing out, getting good retention shots, and then presenting the pistol, having already dealt with that close threat, and engaging that far threat. And kind of definitely a little bit of throttle control there with respect to getting fast shots, still accurate, but then having to slow things down at distance. And the other range worked through a different drill. The other drill over at the far range was set up kind of seeing where you're at as a shooter, incorporating a number of different elements. One, definitely speed, as well as accuracy and some manipulation. So initially drawing out from concealment, 10 rounds into the A zone, and then conduct a reload, 9 rounds into the head box, credit card. Cannot drop a round. And yeah, getting to work through that. After we finished up live fire for the day, ended up breaking, go have some lunch, and everyone had full bellies rather than immediately start doing some grappling with Master Chim. Started with kind of a lecture portion and working through a number of different kind of points and really honestly some interesting stuff. Just going over kind of some different concepts to keep in mind that all dovetail with modern warrior. One of my kind of favorite points that he spoke to was the idea and concept of position over submission. In that, and keep in mind, incredibly accomplished with respect to jiu-jitsu. Like, incredibly accomplished. Has schools, but, also like kind of the where and when. And so when we come to, even though he absolutely trains fighters for think like fighting UFC, stuff like that, being able to delineate jiu-jitsu and understand its role with respect to a sport of fighting versus out in the street where someone's going to come step on your head repeatedly until you're unconscious or dead. Like, two very different things. One has no rules. It's a big sandbox. And so being able to differentiate those two and understand that, like with respect to what we were doing, the importance of position versus submission. So largely the stuff that we ended up working through had to do with how to remove yourself from a bad spot, being on the ground, and get up, fighting back to your feet. Because again, once we get away from sport and there are no rules, first of all, never a fair fight. That's not a real thing. And with that, rarely is it one person and another person. So you might be dealing with this person and their buddy or their two buddies, respectively, are on either side. So how do we deal with that? Like the idea of mass attack, in which case, spending a lot of time on the ground, not the most favorable outcome for you in most situations. So how do we remove ourselves from that? And again, tying it all back in, the idea of position versus submission, because we want to get up, get access to tools, like remove ourselves from that situation. And yeah, really cool, just kind of some of the philosophy and then getting into it. As Master Chim would go through and demonstrate techniques, he would then stop, and everyone has the opportunity to go with their partner and kind of building blocks, like work through different things, to include getting to the point where there were definitely some other like jiu-jitsu practitioners in there of different levels, to include black belts, and it's like, what about this? And it's like, what about that? And boom, here's the counter you're looking for. And so honestly, something for everyone with respect to skill level, but all of it circling back to, again, violence with a capital V. Like, how do we get up and either produce tools or remove ourselves from a bad situation where pretty high likelihood of someone just smashing you in the head with a brick or a rock. Then wrapping up day 2, ended up breaking for dinner, and then one more block of instruction. This one by Harley Elmore, as well as Tom Kier, on flashlights. And you're like, flashlights? Like, you mean just like the utility of flashlights? Kind of, but really in depth, in that a lot of times people will carry a flashlight which has a ton of utility, and they'll be like, oh yeah, I use it for this, this, this. And that was honestly one of the coolest blocks of instruction, being able to work through a bunch of different concepts and techniques that I had never really heard put together or articulated. And yeah, incredible block of instruction. And the chance to, again, with your partner, rep stuff out. Like, I won't take anything from it because I would encourage you to go seek out that training because there's a ton of value with it. But yeah, while people carry flashlights all the time, and sometimes, myself included, use them in a way that made sense while I was a police officer, but never actually had someone articulate kind of the logical order of thought with respect to using them. Yeah, it was a pretty amazing period of instruction. Which brings us to day 3, the last day of the Modern Warrior Conference. Started out there on the range, again live fire, and this time Bill Rapier's cold bore shot, which it's basically a kind of a cold start in a manner of speaking, but there's a lot more to it with respect to kind of on the mental side and arguably emotional side, in that rather than, hey, like how fast can you shoot this clean or something along those lines, it's a scenario of sorts. And he asks you to, hey, like, get your head right. Like, this is what I need you to focus on. Idea being your loved one is at like 25, 30 yards behind you. Whoever that is, in my case, is actually my youngest. And on the word go, you turn around and someone has a knife to their throat. Spouse, child, whatever it is. And you need to deal with that situation. And it is pass fail. Like, it needs to go in the credit card of that IPSC down there. Like, low probability shot. And whatever you need to do to make that happen at whatever distance you feel you need to be able to break that shot. No fail shot. And yeah, everyone had the opportunity to work through it. If you actually take it for what it is and put yourself in that right mindset, like, yeah, like it's very valuable. So everyone ran through that. Once that was done, again, everyone broke into different groups and went to different stations, 2 of which were live fire. One was essentially a movement drill when the target's moving. So being able to draw out and track and get good hits at a moving target, which definitely some good training there. It was fun to shoot through that. The other live fire drill was the get off the X drill. So get your pistol out, start engaging while moving, with the priority of work being move, draw your pistol, and engage. And yeah, getting to rep through that too. People would basically rotate, staying with their groups, and so while there were the 2 live fire stations, eventually move over, safety checks, all that stuff, and you get into some, we won't say scenarios because like you just need to go demonstrate this. It is set up for you. We'll call them drills, I guess you will. And one of which was basically a live iteration of Bill's cold bore shot that everyone went through the morning and having to work through that. And the other one was kind of a grappling problem where you are dealing with a situation, having to throw some elbows because it is not a lethal threat, but eventually it turns lethal, and having to deal with the situation as it presents itself. Things like that I think are really valuable because it pressurizes like students, myself included, when I go through this stuff. in that all of a sudden you have to deal with all of these different things, where if you take things in isolation, like easy, small bites, but when you start stacking stuff up, it creates pressure and the wheels start to fall off eventually, which is fine because it's training. It's the opportunity to go through and be like, oh man, I could have done this better, and get to work through things in a environment where the consequences are pretty low so that you can ultimately leave better. Then the last block of instruction was on kind of family dynamics. The idea of, as a man, whether it's husband, father, protector, kind of different concepts and principles of moving loved ones around you through bad situations and how to kind of go about that. And pretty cool block of instruction. And then kind of expanding on that family dynamic where maybe your family, loved ones, is at the point where they're actually able to help, not just be led. So how do we get them involved in largely kind of some team-based fighting, which some pretty cool techniques. And finally, wrapping it all up, a Q&A with all the different instructors, like essentially a panel, and opportunity for students to ask questions and get answers. Coming away from it, it was absolutely an incredible event. There was so much stuff packed in. I mean, drinking through the fire hose, and the amount of knowledge and experience like all the instructors or even their assistant instructors had, it was really cool. And on top of that, you just have a great group. So you have all these people, like-minded, coming to get this training and meet people you probably otherwise won't get the opportunity to meet. Just overall really cool. For myself, there were absolutely some gems. One, the flashlight class, that was really cool. And kind of one of the other little just like magic parts for me, hand in hand. So one, Tom Kier explaining about, again, in that defense against blades, about the idea and concept of listening with respect to making contact with people. And I won't go into it. It makes sense, like when you hear it in full, but having him explain that and then having the opportunity to do a little bit of training with my training partner that I hopped in for a minute with, who was Harley Elmore, himself incredibly accomplished. And there were a number of things. One, everything that Tom said clicked, like it made sense. It was like this amazing moment. But then with that, also recognizing and appreciating the value in having a good training partner, where if you have someone that is feeding you the appropriate amount of resistance or doing the right thing so that you can get what you need to get out of it, like everything falls in place. And that was actually really cool, getting the opportunity to train across from Harley Elmore. If you're interested in going to the Modern Warrior Conference, it is held annually. As I mentioned, each year there's a theme of sorts. This time it was professionalism. Not sure what it'll be next year, but there'll be links down below, take you over where you can get signed up. All in all, it was amazing. And I will say it's an appetizer of sorts in that it's giving you a bunch of foundational skills, but you're not leaving a ninja. You're absolutely leaving more capable than you were when you showed up, but it's one of those things where, like, if we're being real about it, these martial arts, whether it's pistol, blade work, open hand, grappling, all that stuff, like, it's a lifelong pursuit. And this, I think, did a really good job of helping create a foundation and also illustrating, hey, I should probably put some more time and focus on this, because you get a chance to rep out stuff in pressurized kind of scenarios of sorts, drills, and you're like, oh man, like I definitely need to work on that. And it has a lot of value there with respect to, you're not going to go there and be a ninja and walk away from it, but being able to go there, get good foundational skills, and see basically where some shortcomings are, where you need to maybe apply some more. So rather than going out to the range and doing a bill drill, like over and over and over, because you like doing it, because maybe you're really good at it, maybe you should go spend some time on the mat working on just getting to your feet from different positions. Lots of value there, but overall, really incredible course. Like I said, there'll be links down below if you're interested in checking it out. And last but not least, if you appreciate my content and want to support it, greatly appreciate it, whether it's liking and sharing videos or going over to kitbadger.com, picking up stickers, KBAT target pads, things like that, or supporting me directly through Patreon. Helps me go out, create more content for you, and if you have questions for me, happy to answer them over there where we have an active Discord. But as always, thanks for joining us at kitbadger.com. Look forward to seeing you next time.